Animation in Cinema 4D Lite is similar to After Effects in some ways, but very different in others. Let's take a look. If we look in our project panel, you'll see I have one comp with one layer, a Cinema 4D layer. So let's make sure that's active and press Command-E or Control-E on Windows to edit the original file. I can see over here in the upper right corner, I have a light that's pointed down towards my logo. And so I want to go ahead and render the scene so we can see what it looks like. And sure enough, I can see that I have some pretty deep shadows here. So I want to be able to see these shadows without having to render the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and click in the bottom of the Objects Manager to turn off my render. And here under Options, I'll click on the pull down and enable shadows. Now as we move the light around, I'll get a preview as to where the shadows are positioned. Let's create a camera move where we tilt from the bottom of the logo all the way up. And here I'll just click on my Orbit Around tool and see I want to start down here and then kind of orbit up to here. Now to do that, I need to add a camera into my project. So let's go to the upper right side of our Create tools and click and hold on the camera icon and choose a target camera. The target camera creates a camera with a target tag, letting me know that it's always going to be pointed at this camera target 1 null. So no matter where I move this null, the camera is always going to be looking at it. Just so we can see different control handles, let's click off of our rotation tool and just grab the move tool. Now I want to go ahead and rotate my camera. If I click my camera here up in the Objects Manager, it's currently selected, but I'm not actually viewing the scene until I come over here and click this little plus button. That allows me to view my scene through the camera. Now I want to be dead on to my logo, so let's go down here under the Coordinates section in the Attributes panel and change the X parameter to 0, and we can change the Y parameter to 0. Now we're dead on. Now I want to create a rotation around this center point. And if I click on my camera and try and just adjust the pitch or any other rotation, when I let go of my mouse, it's going to snap back to 0 because it's always pointed at this one null. So what I want to do is actually rig up a system where I can better control the camera and still have it point at this null. So let's go up to our primitive objects. I'm going to click and hold on the cube and add a null into my project. Now let's make the camera the child of the null by clicking on it and dragging and dropping it once we get that down arrow. So now we can select this null, and if I go to adjust the rotation of the null, say on the pitch here by clicking and dragging, I can go ahead and move my camera around and everything's going to look pretty darn good. So let's set a pitch parameter of 90 and add a keyframe. Now that keyframe was added at frame 0 because that's where my playhead was. So let's go ahead and move up to frame 60 and change the pitch to a value of 0. So now we've done our orbit. Now notice I have this yellow circle. I need to actually click in that circle to actually add a keyframe. The yellow circle is letting me know the parameter has been changed, but no keyframe has been added. So if I scrub through here, you can see I have my rotation. Well, let's move our playhead back to frame 0 because I want to go ahead and animate the move of this camera. So here I'll click on the camera, and then I'll go down to the bottom of the timeline on the right side and enable automatic keyframing. So here I get the red line around my viewport and all of my parameters turn yellow, letting me know it's been activated. So let's go ahead and just dolly into the scene for our start frame. So I want it to look like we're kind of close up on the wall. Now let's move our playhead down to frame 60, and we can just dolly back out here to frame up our logo. So we could dolly all the way out so we could see the edges of our plane, but if we just dolly to where the edges are just behind the dark side of our comp, we'll know inside of After Effects, we'll just see edge to edge. So now we've actually created both keyframes. Before I move anything else, I want to disable automatic keyframing. If I go back to the beginning of the timeline and press the play button, you'll see I have an orbit and a move back. So let me press the play button one more time to stop playback. If you want to make adjustments to these keyframes, I recommend doing so in the timeline. So let's go to the upper right corner here where it says Layout and change the layout of Cinema 4D Lite to the animation layout. Now we should see a timeline here in the bottom of our project. And if you notice on the left side, I have a null object. And if I expand that null, you can see I have both my rotation and camera keyframes. So just like in After Effects, if I click directly on a parameter, say this rotation parameter, it will automatically select all those keyframes. So now when I hover over this orange line, I can click and drag it to the right or the left, and all selected keyframes will move. So now if I preview our animation here, you can see I've got my camera move and then my rotation. Now, I'll press play to stop playback. I don't particularly like that move, so I'll just press Command Z to undo that move with the keyframes. One thing before we go, if you need to adjust the ease of these keyframes, you can do so by switching the mode of the timeline. So on the left here, this is key mode, which is great for moving keys around. But if you actually go to F-curve mode, you can select a parameter, say the rotation parameter here, and you can go up under frame and just say frame all, and it'll frame up those keyframes. And here, if I draw a lasso around a keyframe, you can see I have the same control handles. So if I move these control handles around, I can adjust the overall settings, just like in the graph editor inside of After Effects. So as you can see, when it comes to animation, there are many things that are similar inside of Cinema 4D Lite to After Effects. And the things that are different are just kind of subtle things that you should be aware of